Okay, so today we're going to take a look at slope-intercept form. And if you're following along in the textbook, this would be Chapter 9, Lesson 5. And we've been focusing a lot lately on finding slope using a slope triangle as well as the slope formula. And we've also taken a look at how we can find the rate of change, which really, when it boils down to it, is the same thing as finding the slope. We're still finding the change in y, and we're going to place that over top of the change in x. So today, what we want to do, though, is we want to take this a step further, and we want to start looking at how can we create a graph. And we're going to use a specific format known as slope-intercept form. So what I want to do today is I want to make sure that, as you can see on this page here, first, can we determine the slope and y-intercept of a line? Now, the slope, you guys already know. The slope is just finding the change in y. So let's make sure we have this, the change in y over the change in x. All right. And just a couple little things to remember. If the slope is negative, that means that we are moving downwards. And if it's positive, we're moving upwards. Now, as in terms of the y-intercept, this is just simply where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, so if we can determine what the slope is and what the y-intercept is, then it's going to make it a lot easier to graph because we'll be able to draw our dots and connect the points. Now, at the same time, our second objective here is to be able to graph these linear equations using the slope and y-intercept, which I had just mentioned a little bit ago. So let's take a look at the key concept. And this is taken straight out of our textbook, which is the McGraw-Hill Accelerated Textbook. And it just says that the slope-intercept form of an equation is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. All right. So you see the representation here. And I'm going to change my color to red. We have this equation of y equals mx plus b, where the m value is the slope. Now, a lot of students ask me every year, why m? I'm going to be honest, I don't know right now. So I've asked several math teachers. I've asked even my college professor. They had no idea why it was m. So it's just the variable that we use to identify slope. And b, you'll notice that the second value, whoops, let's erase my stray mark over here. I don't want to confuse anybody. But this b value is the y-intercept. And we just use b to stand for where it crosses the y-axis, okay? So the example that they give us is a y equals 2x plus 1, where 2 is the slope. Now remember, 2, so let's put m equals, because the slope's going to equal 2. We can also write this as 2 over 1, okay? And remember, this means that we go up 2 spaces, and then we go right 1 space. All right. Now, how do I know that? Well, up and right are both positive numbers. We go up when it's positive. We go right when it's positive. So if it's 2 over 1, it's up 2 and right 1. So here's the format again. All right. And I just want to identify and just review for you guys what this means. So the m value we said is our slope. So the slope is the change in y over the change in x. And we said that if it is positive, it is going upwards, meaning it's going like this. And at the same time, if it is negative, it'll be doing something like that. All right. Now, this b value over here, this is our y-intercept. All right. So our y-intercept is where this crosses the y-axis. And again, we could have positive or negative values. Instead of plus b, it could be a minus b. So if it is positive, it crosses above the origin. If it is negative, it crosses below the origin. And you've guessed it, if it's 0, it crosses at the origin. So what I mean by that is we could actually have a format where we have something like this. Y equals, let's say, 2/3 x. Notice I don't have anything over here because maybe it crosses at the origin. I just don't have a value to put in there. But at the same time, there's this imaginary +0 that would go in to signify that it's crossing at the origin or at 0 on the y-axis, which is at the origin. So just a little bit of a review of what slope is in terms of the slope-intercept form. Now, notice a couple of other things here. First of all, this y is all by itself. All right, it's not a 3y, it's not a negative y. We don't have any x's on the same side. We don't have any constant on the same side. So what's going to happen is later in this lesson, we're going to actually have to solve for slope-intercept form. It's just the same thing as solving an equation. We're just going to try to get y all by itself. Same thing we were doing 2 chapters ago where we were trying to get the x all by itself. It's the same exact thing, except now we just want to do it with y. Will we have a variable in the problem? More than likely, but that's okay because we know the coefficient of the variable, this m value, is going to be our slope. So here's an example. All right. Obviously, the formatting got a little mixed up here during the conversion into a computer program. So let me rewrite this here. This is going to be y equals, and it's supposed to say 1/4 of x minus 6. Okay. Now, there's a couple of ways that we could do this. The first method is just plain old looking at it and saying, oh, that's easy. I know that this is the slope. This is the m value. And I know that this -6 is the b value. So what that tells me is that the b value is where it crosses the y-axis. Well, this line here is the y-axis. And if I know I'm going to cross it at -6, how about I just count down 6 spaces? So here's my origin. Count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here's 6. If I put a dot there, I know that that line has to cross at that point. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, the other part to this, though, is how do I know what the other points are? Well, I know that it slopes 1/4. What does that mean? 1/4. So if slope is equal to 1/4, this means that it's +1. So that means it goes up 1 space and then over 4 spaces to the next dot. So from my initial point, I can go up 1 space over 4. 1, 2, 3, and here's 4. All right, I had a stray mark there. I apologize. I don't want to confuse anybody again. So that identifies point number 2. And if I do it again, up 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, I got a third point. And you'll notice that I start to develop a pattern here. This pattern is showing me what this line is going to look like. Now, imagine this. If I go up 1/4, I could also go down 1 and left 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Some of you saw that in our organized chaos activity where you had maybe if I had like a -1 over a -4, negative is the same thing as positive because the negatives would cancel out. So we could draw our lines that way as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this. And to finish this, we would draw a line that would pass through all of those points. Now, I do become a stickler with this next part. And what that means, what I'm saying is that you should have arrows on your line. I know it sounds kind of small, but what those arrows indicate is that that line is going to go forever in both directions. Okay? Now, let's think about this. What does that line actually represent? Well, the line represents, on all those points on it, represent all of the possible solutions, all of the possible answers if we were to plug them into our equation. So if you remember, approximately probably about 5-6 lessons ago now, we had a lesson where we would have an X chart and a Y chart. Okay. And what that X chart and Y chart were is that we identified, I'm going to put in the equation here, Y equals, and it is 1 over 4 or 1/4 X minus 6. And then we had a Y value, and we plugged in our own numbers. And I said that the numbers that I would probably use would be like 1, -1, and 0, unless we had a fraction. So if we have a fraction, I would use the denominators. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an X value of -4, an X value of 0, and an X value of +4. Okay. Now, what that means is I'm going to plug those in to this equation. So 1/4 times -4, because I plugged the -4 in for the X, then minus 6. So 1/4 times -4. Well, the 4's actually cancel out, and this becomes -1. -1 and -6 make -7. So what that means is that if I were to turn this into an ordered pair, if I were to make another column and put my xy's as an ordered pair, this would be -4, -7. And if you notice on my graph, -4, -7 is right here. That is one of the points on the line. Same thing with 0. If I had 1/4 and I multiply that by 0 and then subtract 6, 1/4 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 6 is -6. I would be at 0, -6, which makes a lot of sense because when the X value is 0, that means we're on the Y axis, and it's at -6 where we said it crosses. So that's our second point. So what I've done is I'm showing you that the line is actually showing us all of the possible answers if we were to plug in these numbers. Okay. Now, if I were to do this with the regular just 4, because I want to finish this problem. So 4, -6. We would have 1 minus 6, which would be -5. My point would then be +4, -5. And if you notice, that's this point right here. Okay, so what I'm showing you is that we can just trust that this format is going to work, where we find the B value, we plot it, and then we move according to the slope. Or if you really want to, make a chart. But to me, that chart is a lot more work than if I were to just plot the points. So let's try another one. Okay, so we are given the equation of y equals 1/2 x plus 3. So first thing I want to do is I want to identify this is going to be my slope. This is going to be my B value. So because this is my slope and because this is my B value, I can plot some points. Remember, we plot the y-axis first, or the y-intercept first. So it means it starts at 3 because it's a +3. The slope tells me to move 1/2. That means up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. And my rule of thumb is to try to get at least 3 dots. If you can get more, all you're doing is you're just making your line more accurate. Okay. And then I'm just going to plot my line through them. And that's a little bit off, but I think I can slide it down. There we go. And don't forget, we want to have our arrows on both sides to just show that this is going on forever. And I'm going to kind of extend this. Extend it. There we go. Going on forever in both directions. It's that simple, boys and girls. All right. We're just looking at, can we plot the points using the B value, which is the y-intercept, and using the slope. Now, this next one has a little bit of an issue to us, because you'll notice that our equation is not in slope-intercept form. I warned you that this was going to happen, okay? But not a problem. Let's write it out. -4x plus y is equal to 2. So what I want to do is I want to actually ask myself, what do I do? Okay, and I'm going to highlight my variable. What do I do to get my variable y all by itself? Most of you said solve it. So I'm going to solve it by the same rules that we use when we solve an equation. I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to combine any like terms, and they're combined already. I'm going to make sure my variables are on the same side. So my y's, that's the variable I'm worried about, they're all on the same side. Next, we want to use SADMAP. Now, when we use SADMAP, we took care of subtraction and addition first. So that means I'm going to look over here at this negative 4x because this is being added to y. So if I have a negative 4x, to make it 0, all right, remember, this is an addition problem, but this negative kind of tricks us up. It's negative 4x. To make it 0, I want to add 4x. So I'm going to add 4x on both sides. And what that does is that allows these to cancel to 0, so I'm left with just a y. And on the right-hand side, I have 2 plus 4x. Now, because of the commutative property of addition, I can rearrange my order. So I like to have my x's first. So whatever this value is, I just put this first. So it's going to be plus 4x and then plus 2. Do I need to write the plus sign? Absolutely not. So typically, I don't write the plus sign unless it's obviously a negative, and then I write it in. So from here, I'm in slope-intercept form because I have y equals. So that tells me that the 4 is going to be my slope, and it tells me that this plus 2 is going to be my b value. So now I'm ready to graph. So I'm going to go up 2 on my y-axis, and then the 4. Now remember, our 4 is the same as saying 4 over 1. So that means up 4, right 1. So I'm going to move up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. Okay. If I wanted to extend this, I could also go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and back 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, and back 1. And what that does is that just allows me to work backwards. But remember, if we're doing that, if we're extending backwards, we have to just do the exact opposite of both things. So now what I want to do is I want to extend and draw a line. So I'm going to draw my line, and I'm going to add my arrows to show that this is going forever in both directions. Okay, so that's how we would solve an equation that is not necessarily in slope-intercept form, but we would put it into slope-intercept form, and then from there, we would go ahead and we would be able to graph it because we could identify the slope and we could identify the y-intercept. Okay, so what I would like to do is I would like to show you just another one here. All right. And what I'm going to ask you to do is I am going to ask you to solve it and then to type in and answer 2 questions. I'm going to ask you what is the slope and what is the y-intercept. Did you find that the slope was going to be 4 and that the y-intercept was going to be negative 10? I bet you did. So we can plot this then. So I'm going to count down to my negative 10 as my y-intercept. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And my slope is 4, so that means move up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. And I have my points. And then, of course, we want to connect the dots. And so we do so. We have now graphed our solution to the equation of negative 4x plus y equals negative 10, which in slope-intercept form is y equals 4x minus 10. Okay, so we have another one. What is the slope and what is the y-intercept? I'm sure you were able to identify that negative 2/3 is our slope and our y-intercept is 3. So remember, we start at the y-intercept, which is 3 because that's on the y-axis. Now our slope here is a little bit different. Remember, slope is the change in y over the change in x. So when it's a negative, I tend to put my negative on the top. So I'd write this as negative 2 over 3. That's a little sloppy, so I apologize. But what negative 2 over 3 tells me is to go down 2, then right 3. So from this point, I'm going to go down 2, right 3. Down 2, right 3. Notice this slope is, or this line is moving downwards. Because of that, it is a negative slope because it's moving in the downward fashion. And that's why we want to make sure that we identify and we solve equations correctly. And I wanted to show you this one because this is very important to see that there are also negative slopes. So I hope this helps you guys understand how we find the slope and how we find the y-intercept, and also how to graph using slope-intercept form. Please remember, if you are having trouble, rewatch this video and go through the examples. Okay. I'm also going to show you a couple of examples on the skills practice form, and that's coming up next. But I want to make sure that you realize that you can rewatch this video. You can also go into the textbook, and there are tutorial videos that are available for you if you log into the textbook at this student resource section as well. Now, if we were to look at this skills practice page, all right, you're just going to fill this out the same way we've been filling these out. So what I'm looking for here is, for example, 1. We're going to say slope is m. So m would just be written as 12. And you could just write the b, or the slope-intercept form, as what comes next, right? It's negative 4. So I think this is going to be pretty straightforward for you guys. Same with number 7. If you look down here, we're just graphing. So we're just going to start with the y-intercept, which is going to be at 2. And slope is negative 2, which means down 2, negative 2, and then over 1. Down 2, and then over 1. And then we want to try to draw our graph. Now, you guys may want to use a ruler or some sort of straight edge to help you. That would probably be more beneficial to draw these straight lines. So feel free to use a ruler or a straight edge. But that's how this is going to work, the skills practice form. And then what I want you to do is just continue on with your lesson. All right. Please refer back to this if you need any help. You can also check in the resource section of your textbook.